request you to switch off your mobiles, please. Yesterday we had a couple of disturbances, so we should try and avoid that. Well, welcome again to the third and the last day of the workshop here. I'm very happy that all of you all are finding it useful, and we are getting a chance to interact with some of the best minds in the country. We would be having 3 sessions today, as in the last 2 days. Professor Satish Deshpande from Department of Sociology, University of Delhi, Delhi School of Economics, is here with us for the first in the morning. We have another fantastic session after lunch. Dr. Alok from Ambedkar University is here. And then in the evening, we have a very exciting talk on Buddhism by one of the most eminent experts in the country, Professor Pradeep Gokhale. I'll introduce them all one by one during the sessions, but please do take the trouble to be here. If you're not here, you're going to miss something, I can assure you that. We will break up Professor Deshpande's discussion session into 2 halves as usual. We'll start now and have a break at around 11 o'clock for a cup of tea at around for about 15 minutes. And then we'll continue from 11:15 to say roughly about 12:30. Is that fine? Yeah. And then as usual, you're welcome to a very nice lunch. During the tea break, there is some extra sort of material. I will make the announcement for you. The preference is for people who have come from outside. For TSS students, I'll circulate the soft copies. So let people, our guests who have come from outside, first take the folders. And he has taught in some of the best universities in India and abroad. He has worked extensively on many different aspects of sociology, social transformation, social theory, development, and different aspects of social structure and function. He has also been working quite a bit on the issue of caste, and the book which he has kindly asked me to sort of distribute for you, which is there in the first CD which has been given to you, The Problem of Caste, is an extraordinary assortment, a collection of some of the main writings on caste in India, and you will realize the importance of the book when you compare it with another collection, an anthology prepared by an equally eminent person, Sumit Sarkar, where very surprisingly many of the contemporary writings of Dalit scholars are not there. Now that lacuna has been considerably addressed by the book which has been edited by Professor Deshpande. So I had requested him to sort of place in front of you on the table some of the contemporary scholarship on the issue of caste in India in terms of its implication for doing social theory. How does this issue speak back to understanding society theoretically? Of course, the special focus is on India, but one can stretch it to other societies too. And to basically, because he's such a senior and experienced person, a person who has contemplated and thought so much on this topic and on other aspects of social theory, to foreground his ideas, his thinkings, on this and other aspects of social theory to us, so that we, ordinary people get an exposure to a very fine brain and what are his ideas, so that we can perhaps just in our own very small capacities we can take these things forward in our respective areas of work. It is, of course, totally superfluous to cite his works. You can interact with him and discuss with him and ask him about his publications and all that. But we are very happy, sir, to have you with us today. And TISS will benefit enormously from your presence and interaction. Perhaps it's the first time you are coming to TISS, or have you come before?
I haven't spoken.
Right. Yes, so we are very lucky to have you here. So without much ado, may I request Professor Satish Deshpande to take the task. May I now do okay. I must mention that we have changed the logo a little bit. You know, we have jazzed it up, but this is our old logo. So this is from say roughly about 1936. So that's why we thought that we'll honor our guests with this. Yes. May I now hand over the session to Professor Deshpande. Thank you, sir.
And thanks to the Center for Social Theory for this invitation. Since Professor Mandal has so kindly been describing those of us who are speaking here as the best minds in India, I hope you're not feeling worried. These are the best minds that... So, be that as it may, let me start with a confession that I wasn't expecting this. When I was told about a workshop in social theory, can you hear me, everybody? Yes. Workshops on social theory are modes of punishment, mostly. And I had imagined 10 or 12 people who have no choice but to be present, captive audience, and we would spend 3 hours like there are seminars, graduate student seminars, doctoral. I wasn't expecting a room full of people like this, and that's what many of us have been talking at, how to regroup and how to rearrange our plans. So, as Professor Kunyaman said yesterday, we teachers have the usual technique of, if you can't deal with the situation, then imagine that you're dealing with the situation that you could and proceed. So I will try and keep to my original thing, and let's see how best it works. And we'll try and, I would like, if possible, to end the first half earlier and leave more time for the second half rather than the other way around. So let me start very quickly. It's now 10:45. So half an hour or so, and then I'll try and stop. Now the overall theme is, of course, caste and social theory, particularly some recent trends. But before I start on that, I don't know if you had any, I'm sorry to have missed the earlier days of this workshop. As you know, March is a very mad month due to entirely unacademic reasons, having to do with the financial year ending. So most academic events tend to get held in March. And the so-called best minds that are around have to do overtime during this month. So the same faces you see circulating. Every average academic event gets multiple invitations. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here. But I don't know if any general discussion has taken place on social theory itself. What is social theory? What do we mean by it? What should we mean by it? And so on. This is, as you know, very involved and can be a very long discussion. So I don't want to get into that long discussion. Let me simply say what I have in mind by social theory, and we will leave it at that, and we can have a discussion on this in the question-answer session. Even in terms of what I mean or think of social theory, I will only talk about certain operative parts that are, I think, very important in workshops like this. The first point I would like to make to you, suggestion if you like, I would like to make to you this suggestion that social theory is the sort of thing that if you try to do, you can never do. Social theory is, to my mind, a byproduct, almost always a byproduct. Good social theory happens when you're struggling with a problem. And you're trying to struggle with that problem with all the resources at your command. And the problem is winning the battle. So you have to do something more. You have to try to produce more resources. And that's when social theory happens. If you try to sit down and try to produce social theory, you're doomed to failure. So, my suggestion to you is to not think of social theory as a thing, as an attribute that you can cultivate, but rather as a process. And a process that, whether you like it or not, is never complete. Because whenever you have some preliminary sense of having reached something in terms of the problem you're dealing, whenever you feel you have the problem under control, something else happens. And again you start struggling with this new aspect of this problem that you thought you had finally controlled. And again you have to stretch, you have to produce new ways of thinking. So in this sense, social theory is not a skill in the ordinary sense. You know? It is not an attribute that you can cultivate. And most definitely it is not an object that you can snatch away from someone or you can lock up in a cupboard or anything like that. Because of its processual nature, calling something social theory always happens retrospectively. And it happens more or less elsewhere from the site of struggle. Whatever problem you're struggling with, you go on struggling with it. And you mean the collective you, I'm not talking about individuals here. And then later perhaps, or someone somewhere else perhaps, calls what has been happening theory. So in this sense, we have to be wary of the preconceptions that theory, the word theory, in the context and theory as well, smuggles in, so to speak, before it arrives on stage. Even before we are talking about theory, we already know that it's supposed to be something good, something powerful, something that is nice to have, something that we must have of our own. Anup is going to be talking to you about indigeneity, Swaraj, and so on. And on that theme, let me just, without preempting what Anup might say, which I'm very curious to hear as well, I want to end with these remarks on social theory with another suggestion. And this suggestion is that when we are dealing with social theory, just as social theory itself is a byproduct and a sort of side thing, the idea of an indigenous social theory is also something like that. If you set out to produce an indigenous theory, it's an artificial exercise, and you end up like the 1960s exercises in Rashtrabhasha, producing equivalents for terms which nobody uses, nobody can use, and which are, like decorative, what we call showpiece. The lower middle class world of India, a showpiece is something you put in a glass cupboard in the living room, in the drawing room, and they are meant to show people. So if you try to develop indigenous theory as a project in itself, without a struggle with some real problem, without the process that I spoke of, you will produce something that is a showpiece, or worse, something that is worshipped. And theory dies. Theory is deadly if it starts being worshipped. So in that sense, we have to be wary of many of the calls that you will hear about indigenous theory. Because with theory, the Swadeshi logic doesn't work. If you think about it for a minute, what was the logic of Swadeshi? The logic of Swadeshi was, for patriotic reasons, buy Indian products, knowing that they may be worse than the products available to you from the international market. So you deliberately buy cloth that is worse than foreign cloth. You buy nibs for pens that are worse than foreign nibs. Why do you do it? You do it out of patriotism. Can you do the same with theory? Can we say that we will, as long as it is our own, we don't care if our theory is third rate or second rate? It just doesn't work. Because as I said, theory is not something to put on a shelf. You don't sell theory, you can't buy theory. Theory is a byproduct of a struggle with problems. And in that sense, it's a very different thing. It's not where you can make do with less than the best, where your act of using products that are substandard is itself an act of patriotism. You can't repeat that patriotism with ideas. You have to have the best ideas, no matter where they are from. And whenever the issue of indigenous theory comes up, we need to be aware of one or two questions. We need to be asking ourselves these one or two questions. First question, do we have a clear enough description of what makes the theory foreign or indigenous? Second question, do we have a clear enough description of why the foreignness of theory is an obstacle? Because there is always bad theory, right? Everybody is able to produce bad theory. It's a very democratic skill. So when a bad theory doesn't work, it really doesn't matter whether it's foreign or indigenous. So do we have a clear enough description of what is it about the foreignness of the theory, specifically the foreignness, that is an obstacle? So if we have these questions in mind, I think a lot of the unnecessary clutter that surrounds this question can be cleared up. So theory is not about saying garv se kaho. It's not that kind of thing at all. And it's as I said, a process. It's a byproduct of struggle, and a process that is never ending. And I will try to illustrate this, if possible, I had very ambitious, misplaced, shall we say, plans of dealing with 4 pairs of readings that are from this collection. I cite the collection only because it's convenient. You can find 40 readings in one place. This is all other people's work, it's not my work. So editing books is that way very pleasurable. And you get a lot of what economists call consumer surplus out of it, because you get to take credit sort of indirectly for work that other people have done. Let me start then with 2 themes. I had originally thought we could talk about 4 themes. I don't think that will be possible with a large audience like this. So let me limit myself to 2 themes. And they are very closely related, as you will see. One theme is that of reservations, the word that is instantly associated with caste in our public sphere. The other theme that I want to take up is a much more abstract theme, but by showing how the two are related and how the same issues come up again and again in both, I hope to illuminate it a little more concretely than is usually possible. And the second theme is that of modernity, and more particularly modernity and the role of the unmarked universal in modernity. As you can see, this is very abstract. So it's useful, therefore, to start with something very concrete, very contentious, something that all of us are experts on and have views on, which is reservation. So in both these themes, keep in mind these questions about social theory I've already asked you to remember. What is the problem that is being struggled with? Why are we calling particular moves theory? What does it look like? And why is this process unending? What is the yield of the new turns or the new moves that these theorists have made? We are calling them theorists now, but they were thinking of themselves as, every one of these were thinking of themselves as simply struggling with some problem in front of them. So keep these in the background while we start dealing with this, because this is the thing with theory. If you go around looking for theory, it's like that Kabir Doha, Tera Sai Tujh Mein, Jo Pahupan Mein Baas, Kasturi Ka Mirak Jo, Fir Sun Vikas, Khas. The musk deer sniffs around everywhere else for the musk, which is actually in its belly. So theory may be under your nose. If you set out to look for theory, you'll never find. Reservations. The first essay that I had, first of the pair, is the essay by Kancha Iliah, on
30 seconds, I remember.
Professor Pandian, what you have circulated is the extracts from this book or the original papers from the entire? I had only recommended 4 essays from this book, 6 actually. So this isn't an attempt to surreptitiously promote the book. As it is, in any case, this is other people's work. So Kancha Ilaiah's paper, which was published in October 1990, a date you will recognize as very consequential. This is the time when the Mandal conflagration was at its peak. Young men were burning themselves across North India, and in many ways, it was the early 1990s were a turning point in the history of our country in many ways. You're all aware of that, I don't need to say anything. The title is Reservations, Experience as Framework of Debate. And in this essay, how many of you have already read it? Just to have a sense. Has anybody already? Okay. Well, there's a treat in store for you then, if you read it. Let me read to you the first sentence of this article, which will immediately, I think, start making some of the points that I'm making about social theory. Here is the first sentence. I am one of those who became a lecturer in political science under the backward classes BC reserved quota in Osmania University. Full stop. This very thing I'm suggesting to you is a theoretical move. What we later call a theoretical move. Why? Think of the countless arguments you've had on reservation. And the countless modes of what we are very good at. The argumentative Indian is basically the Indian who argues by anecdote. You know somebody who knows somebody, your third cousin's sister, or whatever. Something like that. Something happened to them, and that is the clinching evidence for whatever position you are holding. This very, very commonly we argue like this. But have you come across an argument on reservation, which I'm sure every one of you in this room has had, where somebody is saying very quietly, I am a beneficiary of reservation. Here I am standing in front of you. There are many contexts in which experience is invoked as a theoretical device, as theoretical resource. But here was a debate on which the experience of the so-called beneficiaries was never in the center of stage. We never considered it. There may have been other such accounts, maybe in one of our languages, maybe not in English. I certainly don't know of any other instance of this kind in a journal like the Economic and Political Weekly, which is frontally speaking to those who oppose reservation. With this simple sentence, here I am. What do you say to me? So the question here is, why can't the experience of those who have benefited from reservation, why can't that count as evidence? Why is it always being retailed through first person, second person, third person at several removes? And it's always in the pairing of the undeserving lower caste person and some deserving poor upper caste person who is cheated out of their chance because of this. This is the standard story of reservation. There may be many true instances of this kind. It's not false. Anecdotes are not necessarily false. But when you use anecdotes as basis for theory, you're on very shaky ground. Because this is a game that n number of people can play. It's an n player, infinite number of players can play this game. And there can be an infinite number of anecdotes. What are you going to say? My anecdote is true and your anecdote is false? So in the democracy, in the egalitarianism of anecdotes, The only way you win arguments is if only one kind of anecdote is in circulation, and another kind cannot come into circulation in that sphere. Let me tell you another internet joke which I repeat very often because I think it's one of those blinding sociological insights which, we sociologists never somehow manage. We're looking for theory, we can't find it. But somehow in internet jokes, suddenly there is this insight. You may have come across it. This was being circulated in 2006, 2007. India decides to send a mission to the moon, or it can be Mars, it can be anything. If you want to be up to date, it will probably be Mars now. And immediately argument starts, squabbling starts about the quotas. And you can do the arithmetic, whatever it is, but basically the punchline of the joke is that finally, after much quarreling, it is decided to send 10 OBCs, 6 SCs, 2 STs, and if there is space, 2 astronauts. It's a brilliant joke. Why? Point about caste that recent theory has pointed out. And this central point is the hypervisibility of the lower castes and the invisibility of the upper castes. What is the point of the joke? The unintended point. The unintended point is that the astronauts are simply astronauts. Their caste is not told to you. But is there a single one of you in this room who wouldn't know the caste of the astronauts if I call them astronauts? Whereas the others are OBCs, SCs, STs. Now, even within the framework of a joke, at least we hope our government hasn't come to this, even within the framework of a joke, you think the first OBC off the street will be sent on such a mission? You think those people will have no qualifications? But their qualifications don't matter. It's their caste that matters. And for this side, their caste doesn't matter. It's only their qualifications. Why this double standard? This is what public discourse on caste has done. It has made the lower castes hyper visible. A lower caste person can never leave their caste behind. An upper caste person has the choice. If you like, you can make jokes about yourselves, your caste. If you like, you can be serious about your caste. Most of the time, you have the freedom to be silent about your caste, not mention your caste. And you definitely have the right to become indignant if someone mentions your caste. But the tables are turned when it is the lower castes. However much they try not to invoke caste, someone else will invoke it for them. It will be stamped on them. So in this context, simply bringing the experience of that side of the story that is never told in these contexts, like Iliah is doing, is a theoretical move. After all, what is theory? Theory is a means of getting forward in a struggle, moving ahead in a deadlock. And this moves ahead. It moves ahead, it makes us ask, why is this essay so striking? Why do I feel I've never read anything like this before? Have I read anything like this before? Why haven't I read anything like this before? So, this is theory. You're already moving, right? The rest of the essay goes on to talk about other things. I won't mention those here. But for this, theory as a word is usually opposed to experience. Right? Theoreticians sit in their, what? Ivory towers. Right? I've tried very hard to imagine what an ivory tower actually looks like, but anyway, that's where we are supposed to sit. And on the other side is raw experience, right? Like nature read in tooth and claw. It's there. It's earthy. It's on the ground. But here is experience doing the work of theory. Right? So don't have a picture in mind. don't think of theory like those sheets that hang outside police stations. Wanted. So that you're going down looking for those pictures. Is somebody looking like that? Let me move on very quickly to the other essay. In this pair, the other essay is by Susie Tharu, Madhav Prasad, Rekha Pappu, and K. Satyanarayana. If there are people here from Hyderabad, you may be feeling very happy, and others may be feeling that I have an undue Hyderabad bias. Well, I was in Hyderabad for a while, and my education in caste started in Hyderabad in 1991. Before that, I thought I had no caste, like everybody else like me. And so I am a little partial to Hyderabad, but it also so happens that Hyderabad was the place where a lot of the, what I'm calling theory now, was produced, both in gender and in relation to caste. This essay is called, it was published in, it's a much later essay, 2007, and it's called Reservations and the Return to Politics. Consider the oddness of it. What is immediately associated with reservation in public discourse, in the arguments you have? Is politics far away from reservations? It's in the thick of it, right? And politics in the middle class sense of the term. The silent part of that word is dirty. Right? So when in TV studios and in middle class conversation, you say politics, like English is a funny language, right? Many times there are silent letters and words. So here is a whole word that is silent. This is dirty. So reservation is associated always with dirty politics. Right? So anybody who is defending reservation usually will have to say, no, this is not politics. It is about justice, it is about, big, nice, good things. Not dirty things like politics. And here is an essay which is saying, let us return to politics with reservation. It looks like a losing move, right? It's not king pawn 2 steps, first move, standard chess move. It looks like a losing move. You're moving the pawn in front of the rook. But what they are saying in this essay, in this remarkable essay, which by the way, just to show you the ways in which theory is an unending journey, an unending process. Some of the people, they criticize in a friendly manner, but very vigorous criticism includes me. So you are never safe from theory, even if you consider yourself a theorist, right? Because it's always has a life other than its own. So what are they saying here? They are saying that reservations are not a welfare policy. They are a fundamentally political thing. In what sense political? Political in the sense of being part of, being at the heart of the social contract on which this republic was founded. In that sense, political, in the sense of political theory. Political theory is a very valorized word. Sometimes in India it looks like we don't have political scientists at all. We only have political theorists. So in that sense, claiming this status from that tradition of political theory, the founding of the republic happens because reservations are there. Why? What does this mean? Why is this a theoretical move? Because the idea of a republic presupposes an abstract kind of equality. We know that there is always inequality in society, but conceptually, every citizen of a republic is equal to any other citizen. That is what a republic is. There are rich and poor, yes. Everybody's lives are not the same. But in terms of their claim on the republic, in terms of their share of the sovereignty that is claimed for the republic, in the name of the republic, everybody's share in that sovereignty is equal. How can you have a republic where one of the most ancient, where as a very substantial part of the great and ancient culture that forms that republic, large sections of its population are by law excluded from society. By law, not by accident, not by the working of the market. Exclusions happen in many ways, we know that. But exclusion through explicit law. How can you claim to be a republic? So to make that republic possible, you have a device. You know what accountants call a balancing item. A balancing item is a way of cheating. So both sides of the accounts are supposed to double entry bookkeeping. Both sides are supposed to match. In the end, you do the tally. It's not matching. So whatever is the difference, you say is the balancing item. You call it. Reservations are the balancing item which make it possible for us all to pretend that we are fulfilling the preconditions for a republic. Don't forget, the essence of reservation is a pre-independence initiative. It follows from the Pune Pact of 1932. The Government of India Act of 1935 starts the process by which, in 1936, the schedules listing the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are produced. Why is the Pune Pact necessary? Because otherwise there is a logical progression that is happening. That is to say, every group, distinct group, is demanding a nation of its own in the form of an electorate. And so are the depressed classes. So the first instance of electoral politics in the making, it's not yet fully electoral yet, they are thinking about the future, is in terms of the deal that is struck between Gandhi and Ambedkar. To call it a deal is very misleading because it's like the recent semi-final that nobody wants to mention. One side is wiped out, more or less, and Ambedkar's position is completely untenable because the very first time the Mahatma has gone on a fast unto death. This is not to say that separate electorates would have solved all problems, that there would have been a golden tomorrow if separate electorates had been. But at least the distinct position of the ex-untouchable castes as a group that cannot be part of the republic because it has not been allowed to be part of society itself. This fact was foregrounded. It was in your face. So the device of reservation, through the defeat of Ambedkar and the depressed class position in this context, establishes the claim of the Congress and firstly, of course, the Mahatma and the Congress to speak for one nation. So there is no job reservation in sight. There is no reservation of seats in educational institutions in sight. Because how can those kinds of reservations come about? They can come about only after you have a republic. How can you have a republic if you admittedly say that nearly 1/5 of your population you are by law excluding? So to form the republic, you needed what we called reservation. So reservation bears the load of something much larger than just a welfare program. To demonstrate that this is the case, to demonstrate that reservation is fundamentally a political thing, in a context where associating politics with reservation is seen as self-defeating, where this association is pejorative before the fact, before you even uttered a word, you know that pairing politics and reservation is bad strategy. Because, as I said, for the classes that matter, the classes that involved in such arguments, the silent part of politics is dirty. In that context, to go back to politics, to remind us of what a republic is supposed to be, is a theoretical move. Once again, what is the criterion? It is taking you forward. It's taking you forward in a deadlock position. In a position where all you can do is, each side can do is raise the volume. You can only shout louder and louder at each other. In that context is offered here. Think about this. And for those on the other side who claim to be impartial and who claim to have reached their position not because of their own ascriptive status, not because of where they are born, but because of what reason tells them, to them it is a challenge. Here, you've all read Platos Republic. You all think you're political theorists. Tell us, what is wrong with this argument? So why are we obsessing about who gets how much percentage and whether people who get these jobs are really qualified or not, etc.? We are talking about something entirely different. Something foundational, something that comes before all of that stuff can come. So in this sense, this is theory. So I've overshot my deadline by 5 minutes, but I want to stop with this theme here and invite your responses, so that in the next 15 or 20 minutes we can finish with this part and then have tea and go to the next theme of modernity. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to illustrate to you why these essays represent social theory in the terms that I have tried to outline to you. And why it is in the process of struggling with, grappling with a problem, that you have to reach for more resources, you have to reach for something other than what is already in play. And in the act of reaching for that other, something more, you come up with some moves sometimes that work. And when they work, no matter what you call it, it is theory. Questions, comments, criticisms? Can someone help me by chairing?
My name is Nilesh.
Nilesh.
Yes. My question is, when you said there is a good theory or bad theory, or there is second-rate theory or first-rate theory, I didn't really understood the point. So will you please elaborate the good, bad, or second-rate or first-rate?
Right.
Point. Thanks.
Yeah, could you please say where you are from,
Yes.
where you are not?
I'm going from, I'm faculty from Caste and Social. My question.
Can we have a one Govind between two Nileshs? That will make it easier for you. Yes, Govind, please continue.
Okay, thank you so much. You mentioned about social theory as a byproduct. So when there is a theory building exercise, there are intentional theory building exercise for some of the social work interventions that we do. So how do you see that process, like intentional theory building vis-a-vis theory as a byproduct?
Whenever we think about rights, rights in the liberal framework, it implies, I think, discretion. And discretion can lead to discrimination. And how to solve this problem with respect to caste? Like, I can choose whatever I want, and in this process I can discriminate. So how to solve this problem?
Rights involving discretion in their exercise, or that discretion which you're
For
talking
example,
about?
marriage. This marriage is one example. Like nobody can take away the right to choose whosoever they want. And in this process, they can just hide the caste discrimination.
Samir, I'm surprised you say that nobody can take away the right. It's done routinely by our society all the time. So I invite you to think more about this. Yeah. I think that what you had in mind was probably the idea that rights may either be exercised or not exercised. It doesn't, for example, the argument about compulsory voting. It is your fundamental right to vote in a democracy, but should you be forced to vote is the question. So classical liberal theory says that rights are associated with choice or discretion in that sense. You may choose to exercise the right or not exercise it, but that cannot take away your right. The fact that I don't vote, suppose I don't vote for 3 elections in succession, you can't take away my right to franchise. That's what is usually said, and I think maybe that's what you had in mind.
Yes, we'll take one more question and then sir will answer and then we'll have follow-up.
I think Nilesh was.
Yes, yes.
Nilesh too.
Sir, when such kind of theories comes from someone who is in that, who is a beneficiary, there are further chances of getting branded or stigmatized by others. Second thing is
theory always impartial? Yes.
And second thing, of course, reservation is not a welfare program, so it is not a poverty erosion program. Because a lot of people bring this criteria of economic criteria. His income is more, so why I should get a benefit? My income is less, so why I should not get benefit? So this income criteria, the logic of income, is not much elaborated because or not been taught by that side of theories.
Okay. One more. There was somebody that wanted to. Yes.
Sir, I was part of TIS for many years. I left TIS 2006. My question is actually in some way related to Nilesh to the question. The thing is, basically when we talk about the caste, we usually tend to deal with 2 dimensions. One is redistribution and another one is identity. Redistribution basically deals with socio-economic this thing, and the reservation comes directly under that to level play the thing that everybody understands. And identity is more in a scholarly way, the identity politics are done. So the people who are basically, struggling in the very day-to-day life, this thing are not very closely associated with the identity politics of their caste. The thing I was much amused by your one dimension is always I come across although I'm familiar with most of the Hyderabad writers, particularly I regularly follow the Combat Law, the journal, and Rajagopal's all the arguments and so on. Even in many law schools, majority of the all professionals' view is about the caste and reservation particularly is the question something to do with redistribution. Why? Because that is the direct impact among the upper caste or the people. So I'm scoring more than 95%, but still I'm not. So the thing is, because of that, immediately they tend to associate the reservation question in a way of that I am direct victim of these kind of reservation policies. So that animosity is on the very superficial level, then that ingrained into all level of our life. Okay. So one surprising and amusing angle you put it is, this is actually a, what you can say, the reservation, the idea of reservation basically came to enforce the republic. Basically, that throws up a point, like it is a fundamental right. Okay, so that has not been very convincingly popularized in the theory level. So how, as a social scientist or social activist or scholar, we can contribute that angle in a more popular way? That is my quest for inserting the social theory. Yeah.
So, shameless self-promotion. Yesterday's Hindu carries an article by me on precisely this, what you're saying. How to do it in a more popular way, the argument that it is a something like a fundamental right rather than. So let me move backwards through this. There are at least two questions, and I'm sure many of you also have in mind. The whole apparatus of detailed argument that has gone on around reservations regarding sub-quotas, distribution, how is merit to be calculated, all of these issues. When we think of it as a policy of redistribution, all these issues have to be considered. For in any policy, you have to have a way of implementing that policy, and these are involved. But usually the problem is that by a kind of trick that we play on ourselves, a sleight of hand that we do on ourselves, we slip between levels of argument. So usually the issues that are raised about the reservation going to the proper people and so on, and particularly the use of economic criteria, the point is that once you recognize the Republican argument, the fundamental right argument, then all of these other issues become within category arguments, not across categories. Why is economic criteria brought up as an argument? Because the presumption of the person bringing up economic criteria is that if economic criteria are used, then instead of caste category A, benefits will go to caste category B. That is the intention, right? The validity of the economic criteria argument is within the category. So within whatever caste group A is, within that by all means use economic criteria. But you cannot use a non-caste criterion to convert what is a Republican thing into something else. So you see the point. You're mixing up register, not you, but in this argument, registers of argument are mixed up. So the details of who should get what come after you have decided on the shares of different segments of the society. Right? So what Susie Tharu, Madhav Prasad and so on are pointing to is that let's settle that part first. And yes, within that, see, there is always this confusion most of us have in our minds to do with rights also. We think that the bearers of rights, or those who are demanding rights that they don't have to be nice people. There is no such requirement. Drunkards have rights, rapists have rights. So, a right is not a bakshish, it's not a gift you are giving somebody. That's the difficulty of rights. You have to give rights to people you hate. So in that sense, invoking the language of rights in popular debate, when we invoke the language of rights and show the moral undeservingness of those bearing that right, we think we have made a point. Regardless of the factual truth of the matter, the point is that the right stands whether that moral claim is true or false. Right? So the deservingness, this is where, let me very quickly say something about, I said in passing about sovereignty. It's a very complicated idea. A republic is a sovereign republic, right? We are supposed to be a sovereign republic. What does that mean? Sovereign simply means I have to give no further reasons. The Republic of India decides on a law, and then nobody else can ask questions, because that's the meaning of sovereignty. Right? It's an absolute thing. It's what in sociological theory is called sui generis. It exists in and of itself. You can't ask further questions. There's no justification for sovereignty other than the people. What justifies the people? The people. Right? So it's the end point of the questions you can ask. And that is the sovereignty that has to be shared. It's a very difficult thing to imagine. Sovereignty seems homogeneous, one thing. How can you share it? Because it's absolute. But that's precisely what we have to think. That's why we need social theory. How do we share sovereignty? When sovereignty naturally implies a language of no further evidence, an absolute language. Right? That's what has got to be shared. And if we figure out how to share that, all the other problems, believe me, are much easier. You'll be able to come to agreement even on how to go about, using all the other criteria within categories that have a right to an equal share in the sovereignty. Notice, this is not according to population proportion. So sovereignty is an absolute. Your citizenship is absolute. It doesn't matter whether you're a member of a minority or a majority, or how tall you are or how short you are, or whether you're a drunkard, so on. That is the nature of the right we agree to give all members of a republic. That's why a republic is a big thing. So 2 or 3 of the questions raised this. So this is something that I'm pointing out as we need to think this through. We are not used to thinking about this, both in the academy and outside of it. But that's what is being suggested by these authors. We better get used to thinking about it. And this is, having demonstrated this, as I said, it's not the end of the line. This will raise new questions. You then have to struggle with those. But at least let us move from where we are. Like that, those astronaut joke. Let us at least move forward from that. That's what is being said. The interesting question of theory being invoked by beneficiaries, so to speak. Is theory meant to be impartial? Think about it this way. Whenever you attach the word theory to something, and especially social theory, you are claiming for it a rational basis. You are offering in as transparent manner as possible your line of reasoning. If we didn't have this possibility of offering to each other reasons why we believe what we believe, we could not have society. We would only be our castes, our genders, or whatever it is that we are for the rest of our lives, just there, like monads. The whole point of rational argument, the exciting thing, the exhilarating thing about it, is the possibility of persuasion. Where the person persuaded really believes, that comes to believe that argument. It's a very powerful thing. If you have ever managed to convince somebody and they have taken on what you said, genuinely made it their own, it's the most powerful feeling a teacher can ever have. Or even just an ordinary person, convincing somebody of an argument. And we get to do that for a living. Stabhir's rights and discretion, I think that, think about that a little bit. About marriage and so on, we are all citizens, yes, but we are not only citizens, right? Stabhir, that's what I'm trying to say. We are members of communities, we have genders, we have families, and those matter to us. So when I argue with my brother, I'm not arguing as a citizen of India. Right? So in that sense, because those identities matter, those people have power over us. We give them that power. And it's partly imposed as well. That's why marriage is a particularly good example. In our country, marriage is a particularly good example. On the one hand, it is compulsory. For women, definitely, and also more or less for men. It's like, as they say, 10% relaxation. But it's full of so many kinds of constraints. The kinds of constraints that you choose sometimes you're smarting under those constraints, but they're still working on you, and so on. Right? So that we have to think of. The language of rights in the context of marriage is how it fits there. You have to think carefully about that. That's what I'm saying. Yes. Intentional theories. I have a simple, crude suggestion, just to protect what I am calling as social theory in this sense. Think of those intentional theories as actually methods, where you learn certain skills in order to deal with a problem. And these can be transmitted, they can be put into textbooks, and so on. What I am calling social theory is processual. Eventually it gets put into, it's been put into this book, for example. Right? And if it gets called social theory, people like me go around calling it social theory often enough, sooner or later, if we are truly, as Professor Mandal said, the great minds and so on, sooner or later these things will enter examination questions. And someone somewhere will be learning by heart something to write on social theory as process. This happens, but still, by that time, real social theory will have moved elsewhere. So, in that sense, if you think of what I'm saying is that there are intentional theories that are made, but they are they operate in a much more, they operate in something like a laboratory. And the average scientist's view of a laboratory is that of control. You're able to control that environment. Whereas social theory is by definition a situation that you cannot control. That's why social theory comes about, because you're faced with situations you can't control. Otherwise, you define your problems out of existence. Right? I mean, you would simply change definitions and that would work. But because it doesn't, you're forced to come up with some way of thinking. And the first question by Nilesh Van on what do I mean by secondary theory? Take the straight example of 1905 Swadeshi movement. Coarse cloth, which is made by handlooms in India, is being worn by coarse. It's according to popular accounts as part of the nationalist struggle, badan chil jata hai. Your skin is abrased, is scratched by this cloth, and yet you wear it as a mark of patriotism. What is the cloth doing? It is covering your nakedness, just as any foreign cloth would have done. Maybe more elegantly, maybe it falls better, it's easier to iron, whatever. But you're willing to give up that style or that comfort or that whatever it is in return for showing your patriotism. And by using that less than the best cloth, your morals, your way of functioning, your way of reasoning are not affected at all. Right? So you can do it. Can you use a Swadeshi argument for ideas? Where you say, we know that such and such foreign idea. First of all, as I said, what is foreign, what is indigenous? Because the history of ideas is full of movement, mutual influences. It's very hard to pin down something as belonging here, belonging there. But imagine to yourself this situation where you say, there is that foreign idea which is first class, I know it's first class. I have one here which is third class. Out of sheer patriotism, I will use my third class theory. It doesn't work, because that third class theory will not do the job. So let me put it another way. To produce social theory, you have to be aware of similar attempts in the past. Because as I'm defining it, social theory is the excess, right? It's when you have reached a deadlock using all the resources you have. That's why you have to reach for something new. Right? So if you think of it in that way, I think you will see why the argument cannot work. A simple Swadeshi argument cannot work in the context of ideas. Should we go for tea now, or
just ask them.